Today I want to talk about a topic that's very personal to me, which is gaslighting. Quick story, when I was around 2021, I was in a relationship with this girl and she was constantly gaslighting me. But I didn't know any better. I didn't even know what gaslighting was, so I fell for it every time. She got me so messed up in the head to the point where I thought I was legit crazy. And I still remember until this day, almost 10 years later, that feeling of self-doubt, unsure of what I said, unsure of who I was. Man, I was miserable. And that's why I want to make this video. I don't want anybody to be in that horrible situation because I know that it can scar you for the rest of your life. For those of you who don't know what gaslighting is, it is a manipulative tactic to distort another person's perception of reality. It is a form of emotional abuse. It's not very obvious. In fact, it's very subtle, and most of the time, you're not even aware that it's happening. A good abuser is very attuned to the victim's emotions, and they can be very calculating in the ways they choose to undermine them. One of the worst aspects of gaslighting is that the abuser can convince you that you're not being abused, or they can convince you that you are actually the one being abusive. Please do not be arrogant about this. Even if after watching this video, don't think that just because you know what gaslighting is, you're not vulnerable to being manipulated. From my research, even therapists are vulnerable to gaslighting. Do not underestimate the power of an abuser. If you don't give them enough credit for how much damage they can cause, then you're responsible for ending up in a miserable relationship. There are many ways of gaslighting, but from my research, I can narrow it down to 4 main types of gaslighting, which I'm going to talk about in this video. And I'm going to give you some examples that might not be very obvious at all. And unless you know exactly what it is, you might not be aware that it's happening. I want you to learn about this now, so if you happen to face it in real life, you know how to spot it. You know how to name it so you can avoid it. With that said, here are the 4 methods of gaslighting. I'm going to discuss them in the order of which I think is increasing in severity. So we're saving the worst one for last. Alright, let's go over the first one, withholding. This is not about what they're saying, but it's about what they're not saying. They might pretend to not understand you or intentionally misunderstand you. That way, they don't have to respond to you. When it comes to relationships, one of the most common examples of this is the unwillingness to acknowledge your contributions. Let's say you're the breadwinner in the relationship. You're paying for their lifestyles. You're paying for the experience, like trips and vacations, things like that. But none of those things seems to matter. Normally, with that kind of generosity, you would expect some gratitude or praise, but they don't seem to notice that. They withhold that from you. Now, why would they do that? It is because if they acknowledge the validity of your contributions, then they can no longer play the victim. If they actually admit that your contributions are improving the quality of their life, then there's going to be pressure to reciprocate. They're going to have to start doing their part in the relationship. But they don't want to do that. They're happy sitting back and let you do all the work. That's why the longer they can ignore the validity of your contributions, the more they get to do nothing. And it doesn't have to be about money. It could be about anything. For example, you take time out of your busy schedule to spend time with them. Or you put in a lot of effort to plan an amazing party. Or you put in a lot of work fixing things around the house. When somebody is withholding, they will not acknowledge your contributions. No praise, no gratitude, nothing. Now what happened if you try to talk to them about it? Like, hey, can we talk about our finances? I've been killing myself at work and I think it's time for you to make more of an equal contribution. If they're withholding, they're not going to want to engage in that conversation. They'll go, I don't know what you're talking about, or I don't want to have this conversation. Or I'm not going to talk to you again if you keep bringing this up. This is abusive. Do not tolerate this kind of behavior. The next one I have is invalidating. This is when they minimize or dismiss your feelings. How this is different from withholding is that they might acknowledge your contributions or your emotions, but they minimize it or they belittle your emotions. From my understanding, this happens to a lot of men in abusive relationships. It can happen to women too, but most of the time, it's the men who are victimized. For example, he might say, I'm really frustrated by how you've been treating me lately. Or, it makes me really angry when you keep doing this to me. She'll hear you out and recognize your emotions, but she'll brush it off like it's no big deal. Or she'll go, oh, stop being dramatic, stop overreacting, why are you so sensitive? Now I guarantee you, if the table was turned, if she was having an emotional reaction, it would be like, stop what you're doing, stop everything. This is really important, we need to deal with this right now. And the reason why I said this happens to a lot of men is because we live in a society where men are conditioned to hold back their emotions or that their emotions are not valid. So when a woman accuses him of being overreacting, he fall for it. Yeah, okay, I guess she's right. I'm a man, I'm supposed to hold back my emotions. Maybe I was overreacting. On the other hand, we keep hearing women say, why can't I find a man who's open about his feelings, who's in touch with his emotions? But these women don't have the self-awareness to recognize their contradictions. They say they want a man who's in touch with his emotions, but if the emotions that he's in touch with are frustration with you, sadness and anger about your behavior, then you don't want to hear those emotions. What's likely to happen is that you'll shame him for showing those emotions. Oh, you're overreacting. Stop being a crybaby. Stop being so sensitive. So when you say you want a guy who's open about his feelings, you want the emotions that are convenient for you, and don't show any emotions that are inconvenient. Now, if you confront the abuser about this, you say, hey, have you noticed a pattern that every time I bring something up to you, you always minimize or ignore my feelings? That's when they move on to the next tactic. Diverting or deflecting. Simply put, they change the subject. They'll go, how am I ignoring your feelings? What about you? You're always at work. You're always going out by yourself. You never spend any time with me. You are ignoring me. This is very frustrating because you know that it's their fault. So you bring it up, you confront them about it, but they can still turn it around and put the blame on you. If you don't know what you're doing, you might end up apologizing to them. Another example, you say, I saw you kissing him at the party last night. Can we talk about that? And they'll go, well, now that you bring it up, what about you? You go out every weekend. God knows what you're doing. You could be cheating on me this whole time. Or, and this is a classic one, I wouldn't have done it if you pay more attention to me. You ignore me. You neglect me. That's why I cheated. Notice that when they divert or deflect, they always deflect to a situation that makes you look bad because they want to avoid talking about their toxic behavior. So now they make it about you. And if you confront them about it, you say, you're changing the subject. They'll go, oh, because talking about it makes you uncomfortable, doesn't it? You see, they'll always find a way to make it about you, to make you feel bad. A better way of going about this. Okay, we will come back to that because I can see that it's important to you. But for now, I want to stick to the initial problem that we were talking about. They might deflect again. They might keep going back and forth with you. But I would say that if you have to bring them back more than twice, that conversation is over and you're going to have to find another way to resolve it. And if you can't resolve it, then you got to rethink the entire relationship to see if it's worth it to keep pursuing the relationship if every time you bring up a problem, they change the subject. All right, the last one, denying and contradicting. This, in my opinion, is the worst of them all. It's a really dark form of psychological abuse that is designed to make you question your own sanity. Let's talk about denying first. Imagine this scenario. You say, hey, I think we need to talk about what you said to me last night. It was really inappropriate. And they go, I never say that. I don't remember saying that. They just outright deny it, or they pretend to forget that it ever happened. Do not underestimate the impact of this one. Because of how simplistic it is, how bold it is, it's very effective because it specifically targets the process of rationalization that we all have. It plays directly into the human mind because when they said, I never say that, it never happened, the first thing we all do as human is to rationalize it to ourselves or to second guess ourselves. Wait, what? I was so sure that you said that, but you seem so certain that it didn't happen. Am I going crazy? Did it really happen? And let me tell you something, this gets worse because the type of person who uses this on you, they do not care about you. And if they can get away with it once, you best believe they're going to do it again. The first time they do it, they simply plant a seed of doubt in your head so that the next one's going to get worse. It'll be something like this. You said to them, hey, you said you're going to pick me up yesterday, but you never did. I waited hours for you. And they go, what are you talking about? I never say that. Why do you keep accusing me of something I never did? You accused me last time, and now you accuse me again. Are you sure you're okay? I think you need help. Now you don't know what's going on anymore. You're all fucked up in the head. You see, if it happens over and over again, it can really make you question your reality. They make you believe that you can no longer trust yourself. A second variation of this is contradicting. This is when they bring something that never happened into existence. So instead of denying and say that it never happened, in this case, they say that it did happen. Yes, you promised me you're going to buy me a gift. You promised me that. But in reality, you never say that. You never promise anything. Or you told me you didn't want to come to the party. That's why I didn't invite you. Again, you didn't say anything. You didn't tell them anything. They made it all up. But they say that with such certainty that it makes you question yourself. Did I say that? Did I promise them that? This type of gaslighting is so dark and damaging because it shows a level of disregard for the victim. They're essentially putting their own comfort higher than your sanity. They don't want to be responsible for their behavior, so they just completely deny that it ever happened. But by doing so, they make you question your perception of reality. They would rather have you believe that you're crazy than taking accountability for their actions. For those who have experienced gaslighting, you know what I'm talking about. It's so damaging to be in that state of mind, to question everything you said or did, to feel that you can't trust yourself anymore. That's a horrible state to be in. Now, if you feel like you are in this situation, one way of avoiding this is that you need to have proof of whether anything ever happened. So journalings, photos, text messages, phone calls, recording, witnesses. And let me be clear on this. If you show this evidence to the abuser, they're not going to take this very well because they don't like getting caught in their manipulation. They'll either get really angry or they'll deflect again. It's going to be a very difficult conversation. What I would advise you to do is to keep this evidence for yourself as a way of preserving your sanity, as a way of proving to yourself that, okay, I'm not crazy. It did happen. I did say that. But now you know that they're gaslighting you, so you can decide how you want to go from there. As a final thought, I want to say this. What we used to see in the media is abusive relationships that only go one way, either a man being abusive to a woman or a woman being abusive to a man. But that's a very small portion of abusive relationships. Most of the time, it's reciprocal. So if you're sick of the way that your partner is treating you, make sure you're not doing the same thing to them. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I've been on the receiving end of this, but I've also done this to my partner, stop. Just stop. It takes a lot of courage and self-awareness to admit that you've been abusive, but you don't have to be defined by your past. Be better. Stop taking out your emotional pain on your partner. Take it to where it belongs, a therapist. Work through your trauma and issues so you can stop the cycle of abuse. Alright, I'm gonna end it there. I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences with gaslighting. When did you first realize that it was happening to you, and how did you overcome it? Let me know in the comment. Until next time, stay curious.